everyone, and welcome to our podcast. My name is Tehani Legeay. I'm the General Manager for Identity Fraud and Compliance in Australia and New Zealand, and I'm delighted to welcome Rich Stuppy, Chief Customer Experience Officer from Kount. Rich, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. Looking forward to the conversation today.
Great. And so I thought I'd start by asking you, when you look over the online retail landscape, what do you see as the top fraud threats currently facing those retailers and their customers?
Yeah, great question, and very topical, very top of mind for a lot of people right now. I think the biggest overall trend is that fraudsters are really attacking any point in the customer journey, and they're using automation and stolen data and relatively sophisticated techniques to commit fraud, create brand damage, and in general raise mayhem. And it could be any part of the customer journey. So it could be at login, it could be at payment, it could be at loyalty. So they're doing multiple types of attacks, and often using pretty sophisticated automation to make that happen and to make it happen quickly.
That's really interesting, Rich. So where do you think we are most prepared as an industry, as the online retail industry, and where do you think this is hitting us hardest along that customer journey?
Yeah, I think there's been decades of work in controlling essentially payment fraud, but so there are layers and layers of defenses at every step along the way in the ecosystem, whether it's the acquirer, the issuer, the merchant, etc. Having said that, for as long as we've been working to stop it, the criminals have been working to get better at it. I think the real place that we're starting to see things evolve quickly is in the account takeover and non-payment use cases that are really troubling. One of the essentially post-payment use cases that's fraught with fraud right now are the post-payment disputes, and those can come in terms of friendly fraud, chargebacks, or even malicious returns and refunds. That's a really hot space right now.
Yeah, that's interesting. You know, I mean, we've been fighting fraud for a couple of decades at Equifax and Kount, and with the explosion of data online, you'd be forgiven for thinking that we have all of the data available at our fingertips to fight fraud. But obviously that's not the case. It's not that straightforward. So what do you think are the biggest things that are impacting the online retailers' ability to effectively fight fraud at the moment?
Yeah, I think online retail has changed and gotten a lot more sophisticated, a lot higher requirement on customer experience. And one of the big factors is many retailers are combining their physical assets and their digital assets to create one unified customer journey. That can create a challenge because if you're doing click and collect or other sort of leveraging of the physical facility, it turns what formerly you had time to react to, because of shipping cutoffs and things like that, into a real-time decision that has really increased the complexity and the need to use tools like artificial intelligence and really data-rich processes to help segregate the good customers that are going to help you grow your business from the bad customers that are trying to commit fraud.
That's really interesting. So have you seen anything? What are some of the big game changers that have been happening over COVID, especially for fraudsters? Like, has their MO changed? What's been happening over the pandemic?
Yeah, I think definitely the MO has changed. One, people had a lot more time on their hands, and what we saw was due to restrictions, uh, people really started to focus on digital. And so the fraudsters really focused on digital, and a lot of retailers had to ramp so quickly as a matter of survival that really they fast forwarded their digital initiatives. They fast forwarded those years, and they did it in a matter of months. Combined
Right.
with that, as you think about many COVID relief actions took place that allowed the fraudsters to commit fraud against those COVID relief actions and get additional money to sort of bankroll their whole fraud operations. It was a huge investment in a huge capitalization of the fraudsters' criminal businesses via COVID relief fraud.
And I think that that's probably something that a lot of people don't fully understand, that fraud is a business, and via the COVID relief payments, there was a massive injection of capital, and they've just reinvested that right back into their business and the digitization and automation and scaling of the operations. And so, as fraud fighters, that's what we're contending with, which is an opposing force that has significantly ramped up their business over the last couple of years. So while there are some large players at the top end of online retail, not everybody has access to the sorts of resources to fight fraud. So what does the majority of the online retailers do?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing right now is the recognition of fraud being a concern for businesses, no matter their size, is really becoming pronounced. And what retailers need to do is they really need to start by focusing on their customer journey, because each point in that customer journey is going to be a place that can be attacked. And then you need to work with partners to implement, I call them sensors and controls. So you might want to understand more deeply what's the device data, what's the PII data, what are the interactions happening, and you use those sensors at the appropriate level for each step of the customer journey, and then you implement a control that says, well, if is it clearly fraud, we'll block that. If there's some question, you might review a transaction or do some step-up authentication or some other sort of friction, and then outright block the ones that are clearly fraudulent. And by combining that idea of sensors and controls, every merchant can make themselves a harder target. And it's a little bit of the analogy: if you're being chased by a bear, you don't have to outrun the bear, you just have to outrun the person next to you. And so by making your business incrementally harder to defraud, the fraudsters will make a kind of a rational business decision, like, don't waste my time attacking this hard target. Move on to the next one and do their damage there.
Yeah, interesting. And so, again, with the explosion of data that's available, I'm not sure if that's readily available to everyone or not, and we should cover that separately. But how does an online retailer understand which data elements that they should pick up on or look at different parts of the customer journey in order to make a better decision about whether to approve or not? How do they pick those data points up?
Yeah, so and that's a great question, because it's why retailers are pinched a little bit here, because you want to have your sensor system essentially be invisible. So you want to leverage the data that the consumer is making available in the appropriate context for the appropriate step of the journey. So You don't want to ask too many questions because we all know the more questions you ask, the more likely you are to have conversion issues or cancellations mid-order stream. And if you're a merchant, you're going, I paid all this money to get them here. They're in the mood to buy, and I'm going to ask them too many questions, and they're gonna bolt. And so you don't want to do that. So what you do is you think about what's the normal amount of information, and then you work with partners that can augment that data. And you know, if you take a company that has like Kount, that has a large fraud control network that works across the globe, we can take an individual data element and through feature engineering and data augmentation, turn that individual data element, something as simple as the first 6 digits of a credit card number. You can derive hundreds of data elements or machine learning features from that. You can do the same with an email address. You can do the same with just the device behavior as it traffics your system. And so what happens then is you just ask the normal things to fill out the order form and get a service delivered to you, but you go from examining or having the ability to examine, let's say 5 data elements to thousands of data elements, and then the ability to use it to do that in real time and leverage the most sophisticated technologies like artificial intelligence, and then have let's say a policy engine that can help you make sure you're doing the type of business that you want to do as a retailer.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You know, you talk about a few key things there, like balancing friction with customer experience and risk. And, you know, on the whole, that is the continuous balancing act that online retailers and other online businesses need to navigate. That's continuously changes, right, as the digital landscape evolves. And what I'm also quite interested in is what do you see? How do you see the market responding to that? Or are there different responses in different pockets? How is online retail going in balancing a frictionless customer experience with risk? And where do you think, say, the top 3 mistakes are being made?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that I see is I have literally thousands of conversations a year with active merchants that are in the process of fighting fraud or trying to learn more about how to fight fraud. And one of the things that's pretty unique right now, and it's definitely a trend, is what I say is it's getting crowded in here. So it used to be you talk to a head of e-commerce and maybe a head of fraud. Now you're talking to e-commerce, head of fraud, head of payments, cybersecurity, customer experience. We'll have the marketing people show up and ask questions about what's happening. So it's getting crowded in there, and it's getting much harder for the individuals to make the right decision. What my fraud brothers and sisters that spend all day fighting fraud, this is a place where they can add a tremendous amount of value, because the marketers don't understand necessarily that all the traffic that they're delivering to the site isn't good traffic. And the cyber folks think about securing the pipes and the infrastructure and the ecosystem, but those pipes can be, quote, perfectly secure, but a sophisticated fraudster will use those pipes against you. And then the customer experience people, they develop an awesome feature like a one-click button that converts your loyalty points to a gift card and allows you to aggregate it to anybody on the network. Well, that's the sort of feature that a fraudster will exploit. So you can do those things, but you have to have the right sensors and controls and forethought and policy in place to make that work. So it's about bringing the right players to the table and then figuring out what's actually happening. And how do you figure out what's actually happening? you look at the data about the customers that are trafficking your site to really understand how to engage with them better.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I can see how that's, a key thing that that you're seeing across all of those online retailers. And it's thematically, it's a theme that I think gets picked up a lot, which is in the past, maybe we were speaking with one person. Now it's a cross-functional discussion. And even though at first you might think that that's hard to broker, the only way that we can beat fraud is if we combine our resources across the business and have a whole of customer experience view. And I think that theme is also picked up, surely, data collaboration across the industry is more effective than just looking at your own data when you're fighting fraud.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if you could, comment on that one.
Yeah, I think absolutely correct in that fraud is a global problem. Fraud is a sophisticated and organized problem, and the entities and the teams and the illegitimate businesses that are attacking you are, as a merchant, are attacking another merchant somewhere else, whether it's in your country or across the globe. And if you build that identity network, that we call it the Global Identity Trust Network, and it's about understanding who are the good actors and who are the bad actors, and then leveraging that understanding in a scalable, real-time way.
Yeah, I mean, fraudsters are smart and sophisticated, but so are we as fraud fighters. So I think it just reiterates the message that not only organisationally we have to combine forces so that there isn't a loophole or a silo across the organisation. And that applies to a view of the data as well along the customer journey. So it's key to have that data linked through to all stages of the customer journey, and similar theme or concept across the industry. So fraudsters will exploit silos or breakpoints within an industry or across industries, and it's our job as fraud fighters to collaborate on that data and to close those gaps. Is there anything else that you're seeing when you're speaking to those, thousands of retailers? I asked you that question beforehand. What are the top three, the biggest mistakes that we're making across the industry? What's something else that you're seeing?
Yeah, I think there's a problem that people are not recognizing. And it's the idea that if we are taking losses to fraudsters, we are funding the furtherance of malicious activity. So if you're, some people say, well, it's just the cost of doing business. But I think that's the wrong approach, because for the money they take out of your business, they're investing and they're using it to do worse things. And I'll just say worse things because it's very well known that there's more to fraud than just the stealing of online retailers' money. Yeah. So I think we need to remember that as we strengthen our companies together, it actually puts pressure on the fraudsters such that they can't do some of the other negative things.
Thank you, Rich Stuppy. That's been a really insightful and meaningful conversation about how we can all continue to work together to fight fraud.
Thank you. Always happy to help, and I hope we get to do it again soon.